Good afternoon, it's Lee Cassidy from Tactile Technology, and it's our regular lunchtime session, SMESec. So we talk about all things security in plain English, not Klingon. So today we're actually moving on to the first stage of the NIST framework, because we did a refresher on NIST framework yesterday, and the first section is identify. So it's looking at how you can identify all the issues and all the areas that you need to work on within your organization to make yourselves more secure. So part of that process, you can actually go through what we call a risk assessment. So it's understanding where you stand today from a risk and the areas that you need to prioritize. So what I've done is I've actually done a risk as an example, so we can actually go through that and see how it's displayed to you. So it's effectively a survey. So we go through a number of questions, answering each question quite simply. We would work with you as a company to do this, and at the end of it, we'll end up with effectively a list of answers, and then what that results in from a risk perspective based on that. We can actually go deeper into each one of them later, but the first pass is around about 70 questions. It seems quite a lot, but what it's doing is asking in different areas to try and ensure that we've got a good picture of what your current risk is. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and we'll give you a look at what the actual risk assessment would look like. So once we've completed it, what it does, it breaks down the risk into these green areas which are low, moving across through into amber, where we're looking at medium risks, and eventually across into red, which are critical risks. We have then a list of the critical, high, and the medium risks associated with it, and all the low are left out of that list at that point in time. So we can see across in each section, they're actually summarized. So under identify, we've got some low risks, protect, we've got low, detect, we've got medium, respond, we've got low, and then recovery, we've got low. So we can see in each section which piece we've got, and then they're broken down by the risk areas on the right-hand side, so we can go into each one of them. So on the actual diagram here, we can actually click on each one of them. I'm having to look over my other screen because I've got two screens open to be able to share this with you. If I shared the screen in front of you, would end up me disappearing off in a tunnel with my video. So I'm doing it on a separate screen. So I'm going to have to look over there as I'm doing things. But as we select each one, what we do is get information about that. So we can see what the question was. So the question was, do you have a threat detection product in place today? And just to explain that, we're going to talk about threat detection and threat response tomorrow, because that's part of the NIST framework, that we would actually look at detect and response. And with endpoints, you've got two options. You've got endpoint protect, which is creating effectively good locks on your doors and windows around your house. And then the second, the detect and response, is having an alarm system that calls someone out to come and actually deal with someone breaking into your home. So that's what we look at, the difference between EPP, so endpoint protection, and endpoint detect and respond. And we'll come into that more in depth tomorrow. I'm going to cover 15 minutes talking about EPP and EDR products tomorrow. But the key things here is, do we have anything that actually will do detection at the moment? And we've said no. So what we're saying is there is a need to put some kind of real-time threat detection in place to ensure that we actually understand if our endpoint or endpoints have actually had a threat. So we can actually in real time capture details on what's happening to understand that there's been some kind of threat from either credentials, from some malware, or some vulnerability within the operating system or an application on that endpoint. We can detect it with this specialized software, and then we can respond to it. So we've got one highlight, which is that critical there, to actually say that there could be an issue. We can then look at the high one, and if you look at the high one, the next question is, does your organization have an internal process for assessing risk? In reality, we do, but we don't have everything in the green for this example. So, what do you do about assessing risk? Do you go through and make some decisions on what risks are viable to you? When we talked about the 10 steps for the National Cyber Security Centres, 10 steps for a better, secure business, one of them was identifying what the information you've got and the data you've got and what risk there is of that data either being encrypted, deleted, or extracted by a hacker and taken off and used in the wild. So really, you've got to go through that process and understand what your risks are and assess those risks. So the key thing when you're doing a risk assessment is one is to understand what level of risk it is, the impact of that risk, and what the likelihood is it. And then what you do is put some remediation in place. So how can I reduce that risk? So if I can reduce the likelihood, down to as low as possible, there's less chance of it happening. You can't normally change the impact. So the impact of something is always going to be the same, but the likelihood of it happening through mitigation is going to reduce the risk to you as a business and to the organisation as a whole. So that's the way that we would do that. If I go back over here and we go to the next one down, physical access. So we've got here, do any of your users have admin access? We've said yes to this, just to give an example. And part of, again, of the 10-step framework we talked about over the last 2 weeks, one of them was talking about user privileges and what level of user privilege. So if you've got users who've got admin access, that is a risk, because if their machine or their user is compromised, those privileges can be used to actually take control and do more damage than if their privileges are quite low and they've got limited admin ability across the organization's infrastructure and services. The second one, is your physical office locked when you're vacant? Yes. So we've covered that off, that we're actually locking it. The problem is, you have some admin users with admin access. So we go through this process, answering questions, and we end up with a picture of our threats, and we can actually click on the actual coloured pieces here and go to each one of them, and it identifies which area it is, and we've got the sections on the right. And this is an online system. You'd have access to this if we put this in place for you. The second thing we can do is generate a PDF document that gives you a good picture of what your risk is. So again, it goes through that 5-stage piece from NIST. So talking about the NIST framework: identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. So we can go through each one of those, and it's breaking down those subcategories, talking about asset management, business environment, the actual governance of that environment, and working our way through each section through to the recovery capabilities we've got in place to do this. Then we get a pictorial view that we've got on that online version, so showing where our key risks are that are moving across to the right, which is into our critical area. And again, then it's documented below. But this time, inside the large document, we've got some remediation steps as well. So one is, do you have a threat detection product in place today? The answer is no. You're not able to detect threats. An automate threat detection system is a gap in your overall security measures and their posture. So then we'll look at implementing a threat detection solution that can actually deal with this. Is going to be a critical thing. And it goes through each one of those items through as we go through. So what it's doing, it's not only giving you an assessment from the risk, but it's also prioritizing those risks for you. So later on, you can actually go through and actually deal with them. What we can do is help you then remediate all of those risks. And then afterwards, we can actually do a second assessment, and we can compare the two, and we can see how that level of risk is reducing. And the idea is, over time, you will get to the lowest level you can. And every time we assess, we should be staying at a really low risk to the business from a cybersecurity perspective across all of those 5 areas. The identify, detect, protect, detect, respond, and recover pieces as well. So looking across all of it. So hopefully that's given you a bit of a picture about how you can actually develop some kind of risk assessment for your current situation by using a tool like we have here with the Identify NIST-based uh, threat assessment tool, which we can do this. At the moment, we're doing an offer for £50 if you're interested to do this. It takes us quite a while to go through and cover off all the questions with you, answer those, and put them in place. But then you will end up with a document at the end of it that gives you a good picture of where you are. You can also then utilize that towards something like your Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus, because it gives you pointers in the areas that you need to really focus on to ensure that you're actually going to meet that Cyber Essentials or Cyber Essentials Plus governance piece as well. So really useful document, and helps you point you in the right direction. Again, you can work with another third party to remediate those risks, or again, we're happy to work with you as a customer to, put those things in place and make sure that you're as safe as you can be. My view is practicality. We want to make sure that all of our customers are as safe as they can be, and we've mitigated as much of the risk as possible. One of the big problems you find with cybersecurity, if you don't understand what's happening through live and real-time monitoring, there could be a situation that you're actually have been compromised, but you don't know about it. And one of the terminologies we talk about in cybersecurity is a thing called dwell time. And this is actually from the point of time that you've had some either vulnerability or some way that you've been taking control of your machine, your service, or something, and you have been breached, to the point in time that you either identify it or they actually do something like a complete lockdown or encryption of your files, for a ransomware type attack. So that dwell time can be anything from hours to many months. In some attacks we've seen over the last couple of years, some of the actual dwell times have been up to 6 months to ensure that software that they've actually compromised within some of the ISVs in the past. People like SolarWinds had some of their updates compromised, and these were left for quite some time to ensure that they had time to be dispersed and out within SolarWinds customers, so that when they actually started to utilize them, they had a very large attack surface, lots of customers to go after, rather than doing it quite quickly and only a small number of deploy that particular update. And it's the same when they're doing an attack against a single entity. They're going to take the time to try and build as much of a bridgehead before they start enacting it and moving things forward with it. So hopefully that's been of use to you. We're quite happy to put some threats risk assessments together for organisations. So if you comment on the post and let us know if you're interested, we can get that sorted for you. It would take normally around about a week to do each one of them. It takes a day or so to go through all the questions, get those answered. Then we would actually go through creation of the actual threat assessment, and then production of the actual document and bring that back to you. But we'd also then go through in plain English, because that's the driver really from my perspectives to just security in plain English. We'll go through each one of those threats and explain what threats they are and focus on the priority areas, so we can actually do something about that quite quickly and ensure that you've mitigated your risk. So tomorrow we're going to move on to talking about endpoint detection and response, and we'll go through the difference between an EPP, endpoint protection product, and EDR, endpoint detect and respond technology. They are different in the way they work, and also there are things that you need behind it, because an EDR product's no good if you've got no one to respond or nothing to respond. So it's important that there are either services or automation in place to do that response, and we'll go through those pieces tomorrow. So thank you again for joining us for this quick 15 minutes of security in plain English, not Klingon. Join me tomorrow at 12:30. We'll be talking about EPP and EDR. Thank you very much.